My Borrowed Son. Chapter 21. Lending a Hand. The summer came and went, and before he knew it, Parker was a sophomore in high school as a 13-year-old boy. The fallout with Selena had almost no effect on the overall friend group, except for Spencer, who decided to stay with the friend group despite his twin sister's pouting. Spencer said that his sister was just trying to be nosy, and that while she did have a massive crush on Parker, he knew because she wouldn't shut up about it. It was only part of her motivation to ask Parker to be her boyfriend. Her curiosity got the better of her, and it divided some of the friends for a short time, while their versions of the event circulated. Regardless, summer made for some great movie nights for the group of childhood friends, and all of them managed to find time to see Parker virtually. There were large gaps of time where Parker wouldn't hear from anyone, but that was okay. The incident with Selena made Parker feel a bit more reserved and protective of himself, specifically about his condition. More time was dedicated to writing and studying late in the evenings because of it. The fallout initially left a bit of a hole in Parker's chest, but it was something Parker felt himself getting over quickly. Selena always had a flair for the dramatic, and now was no exception. Parker also knew that the frustration of people not knowing about his condition and keeping it a secret would take its toll on him. It made him feel lonely and guarded, which combined during the new school year into Parker being a lot more quiet than he was in his previous grades. Some of his friends did ask why he was reluctant and if he felt comfortable with sharing more, but Parker quickly shut all of it down and retracted into himself. That is, until it came time to partner up in one of his English literature classes. Parker had hoped that he might be left to his own devices and write a story on his own, but there was an even number of students in the class, which dashed his hopes. Parker sighed and leaned back in his chair. If he knew the general pattern, he would be writing the entire story alone, along with a report, and someone else would get a piece of the grade he earned. As his teacher read off the names of his fellow classmates, Parker heard his name called along with the name of a girl he had become acquainted with last year because of her writing. They had actually been at the same middle school as well, and even shared a few classes now that Parker thought about it. They had never officially met, but that didn't stop him from knowing her name. Lindsay Sullivan. She was a bit of a quiet, pensive girl, but her poetry was absolutely flawless. It reflected a spunky, upbeat kind of girl who was mature far beyond her years. Parker didn't need to be an adult to tell that Lindsay was well-spoken and knew exactly what she wanted and was willing to wait or do whatever was necessary to have it. She also had a subtle boldness about her. During a few instances where one of the other students was being picked on, it was Lindsay who helped come to that student's aid. There was a subtle intimidation that loomed behind her bright green eyes, and she knew it. So, when Parker heard his name paired with hers, Parker felt a sense of unease settle over him. There was something about her that, when they had class discussion together, made Parker feel like Lindsay could see right through the camera. Still, this was just for class. He wasn't going to talk to her outside of class. They were meant to talk for assignments, and that was all. Lindsay came over to her new desk in front of Parker's camera that was set up in class and smiled politely as she organized all of her books and notes on the desk. "Hey, Parker. It's nice to meet you, finally," smiled Lindsay. "I think we've had a few classes together last year and in middle school, but we've just been ships passing in the night. Parker looked into her eyes and saw a bright spark of creativity blooming in those green eyes of hers. He smiled back politely, readjusting his tie, and nodded. Yeah, I was just thinking the same thing. It's nice to meet you too, Lindsay. Lyn, please, emphasized Lindsay, as she began tying her thick brown hair into a low bun. Don't get me wrong, I like my name, but I let my friends go by my nickname. Parker snorted in amusement. Are we friends? He asked. Lyn smiled and leaned forward on the desk, resting her chin onto the palm of her propped-up hand. I think so. We have each other's names, and we've had a few classes together. We just need to find out our favorite colors, and we're basically besties, grinned Lyn. Unless you're not comfortable with that, and prefer to be strictly professional. But where's the fun in that? Parker felt his cheeks getting a bit warm. Something about her features and her easygoing personality suddenly made him remember those nervous butterflies he felt when he and Selena talked all those months ago, and, instantly, he felt himself wanting to retract. The last time he was asked his favorite color was when Selena went into that random rant about how boyfriends and girlfriends told each other things, and Parker didn't want a repeat performance. Well, we're at school and it's supposed to be more professional, stated Parker. Lyn sighed before shrugging her shoulders and snagging what looked like a fountain pen from her desk. Fair enough, Mr. Silverstein. Now, on to the assignment. We don't have a lot of time in class to finish discussing what our story is going to be about, and I don't want to have to work extra after school on something we could have knocked out right here and now, stated Lyn, as she began making notes at the top of the page. Her go-get-em attitude was something Parker wasn't familiar with from his fellow students. Many of them took their education seriously, yes. However, it was usually Parker who had to bring the conversation back on track. Rarely did they delve immediately into the assignment. It was also odd that Lyn didn't ask anything about his condition. Parker's experience was that 99% of people, when one-on-one, would ask him at least something about why he was behind the camera at home and not in class. Not her. It was, in a word, refreshing. And soon Parker found himself enthralled in their conversation about what kind of story they were going to create for their literature course. So, part of the rubric says that we have to do extensive research in the area of our choosing. It must be historically accurate, within reason for a fantasy novel, so to me, this could mean a lot of things. And I can send an email regarding it, but I'm thinking that we need to find something we're both interested in that could potentially involve a lot of research. We also need to cite our sources for whatever we choose, which will be fun. So, what do you want to do some research on? What do we want our story to be about? Asked Lyn, as she tore her eyes away from the screen and onto Parker. Parker, whose eyes were mostly scanning the rubric, glanced over to catch her eyes again. A shiver crawled down his spine as he glanced back at the digital checklist their story needed to achieve. Well, I know what I want to do, but it's not for everyone, muttered Parker, as an idea was already formulating in his mind. Oh, let's hear it. No bad ideas, relatively speaking, stated Lyn. Parker bit his lip and glimpsed his space poster in the corner of his study room. He sighed and thought there was no harm in suggesting it. It was an idea he had already, but he planned on this being part of an independent series he would publish on his own. "Oh, okay, hear me out," started Parker before taking a breath before the plunge. "I'm really into space and satellites and everything. Could we do some kind of space adventure?" Lyn hummed contemplatively before nodding slowly. "I think we could do something with that. I don't know much about space. Would this be about some kind of technology AI thing that finds a civilization? Or is it like Star Trek where you've got a captain of a ship and they go exploring around?" Maybe a mix of the two? I was just thinking about topics in general," said Parker, surprised that Lyn was so easily convinced. Lyn hummed again and scribbled something into her notebook. Passively, she remarked, "Personally, I'm kind of into pirates and all that. Hey! If you're not totally sold on a futuristic idea, do you want to do a little combination of the two ideas? We have precedents with that one show, Firefly. Have you ever seen it?" Parker had actually seen the show recently, but he didn't see the very end of it because he had just started it. "You want to do space pirate cowboys?" asked Parker, finding the idea amusing and alluring at the same time. "Something like that. Firefly, mixed with a touch of Treasure Planet, and all of a sudden we have a hit. What do you think? Originality points and all of that. Plus, we can each do research and break up the work if we want. I don't know, what are your thoughts?" asked Lyn. Parker thought about her proposition, and already his mind was coming up with a bunch of fun ideas. He could see a crew of space pirates going around breaking all of the rules on different planets, but also helping everyone. A kind of Robin Hood-like character came to mind, and Parker found himself not opposed to the concept. "All right," he said finally, noticing that Lyn had torn her eyes away from her writing to look up at him. "Sure, let's try it out." A beaming smile from Lyn suddenly made Parker's cheeks very warm all of a sudden, making him look away from the camera as he quickly tapped away on his keyboard and shared his screen as a document. It took only 10 minutes for the two of them to come up with a solid concept for a story. Together, they decided that the Galactic Federation, the overall ruling government body of the Interstellar Collective, had been corrupted by career politicians who had forgotten what it was like to scrape up a living. As a result, piracy and black markets blossomed in the oddest places, and space was no exception. Captain Orion Zane, a charismatic leader with a true heart of gold, decided he wouldn't stand for the injustice. He and a group of 11 others ran a ship that they collectively named Karma to intercept convoy ships and break up blockades of oppressive spaceships. The announcement of class ended their creative flow, but Lyn offered her number and Discord username if Parker wanted to add her as a friend and talk more about the story later. In the meantime, she would start investigating the definition of pirate, marine laws that would apply in international waters as well as space, and weapons that traditional pirates used to see what they could futurize. "Okay, sounds like a plan to me. I'll talk to you later, Parker. I mean, Mr. Silverstein," said Lyn. "Bye, Lyn. Oh, sorry, Ms. Sullivan," said Parker, before exiting to the lobby and preparing for his next class. For whatever reason, Parker suddenly found himself completely distracted for the rest of the day. He was researching space during math and history, and when he wasn't doing that, he was thinking about the way Lyn looked at him over the screen. Every time he thought about her, everything in him tingled and made him almost uncomfortably warm. What was almost alarming was that Parker liked this feeling. Just thinking about her dark green eyes flicking up from her paper made him shiver. Class continued as normal, and Parker found himself eagerly awaiting his English class just to talk to Lyn again. He even dared to add her on Discord so the two of them could talk after school ended. Their conversations were primarily about their collective story, but the conversation would often drift to other topics by the end of the evening when they had to go finish work or eat dinner. Parker liked talking to Lyn. There was something about her that drew him in, regardless of topic. What made it better was that they were similarly aligned in how they thought class should be conducted, what they thought about different elements of life, and even their favorite activities, which were numerous and all over the place. She was a fascinating person to talk to, and Parker realized later that his face would ache from how much he was smiling. It wasn't until dinner, nearly 4 weeks later, that Parker found himself snapped out of his stupor when his mom asked how he was feeling and if there was anything wrong. "Your cheeks are so pink. You're not running a fever, are you?" she noticed as she dished out a bit of fish, greens, and rice onto a small dish for Parker. I was just thinking," said Parker. "Thinking? About what?" asked his mom. Parker took the dish and sat down at his place on the table while his mom fixed herself a plate. "Well, we got new partners for English class, and, well, she's really nice," said Parker. The gleam in his mom's eyes was undeniable as she sat down at the table and smiled knowingly. "Oh? She?" prompted his mom. Parker felt his cheeks blushing harder than ever. He knew he must look as red as a cherry tomato as he quickly blessed his food and began eating. "Yeah?" he said as he shuffled rice into his mouth. "Really? What's her name?" asked his mom. Parker knew he was busted at this point. It wasn't like he was keeping a lot of secrets from his mom, but he also didn't mention his adventure into the walls or the breakup with Selena. He licked his lips and kept his eyes averted ever so slightly, wondering why he was feeling suddenly shy about talking to his mom, as he said, "Lyn. Technically, it's Lindsay Sullivan, but she likes her friends to call her Lyn." Amanda smiled as she brought her cup up to her lips and took a drink. Parker unknowingly had been talking a lot about Lyn recently, but the context was usually class and how good she was at pretty much everything. Amanda suspected Parker might be developing his first real crush, but actually hearing it was both exciting and worrisome. Amanda worried about when this day would happen. She wanted her son to develop feelings for someone in his own time, but she also knew the complications of his size when talking to someone who was much bigger than he was. There were so many factors when developing a crush and getting into a relationship, and Parker's size was one of those factors, though he didn't really know it yet. It wasn't something that would come up in normal conversation. Plus, there were complications when it came to how tall Parker was. It pained Amanda to no end, but a worry she had was that Parker wouldn't find someone his size who he would like. Now wasn't the time to talk about that. Or maybe it was. She would have to read some of her parenting books later to see how to talk about these topics with Parker later tonight. In the meantime, she decided to celebrate his feelings and encourage him. These feelings were natural after all. "Well, Lyn sounds like a wonderful girl, remarked Amanda. At this, Parker's eyes changed. His mom swore she saw what she could only describe as dream eyes as Parker thought about his friend.
Yeah, she's great. She's into photography and showed me some of her stuff. It's really impressive. She does these cool perspective shots of flowers and all sorts of other things. I need to show you some of these things she sent over Discord,
said Parker, a bit too eagerly as he suddenly realized and went back to eating, cheeks bright scarlet. Yeah? Asked Amanda, hoping to prompt further reaction from her son. Sadly, Parker only elaborated a little as they finished their meal together. Parker was in a bit of a hurry because, according to him, he had an important assignment he needed to finish before the end of the night. But Amanda suspected that Parker simply wanted to get online and see if Lyn was online and available to chat. He excused himself from the table hurriedly and vanished back to his room, jogging to cross the floor and taking the stairs 2 at a time to make it back to his space. Amanda cleaned up after dinner, conflicting emotions swirling inside her. It was only a matter of time before Parker started asking the hard questions about why he couldn't go see Lyn in person. Drying her hands on a crumpled dish towel, Amanda retreated to her own room to do some research about talking to your children about difficult topics such as puberty, romance, and, most crushing of all, adoption.
Well, I think we've got the chapters outlined well enough. How did your research go, by the way?
Did you find the original case about space being international waters? Asked Lyn. She was laying on her stomach with her laptop propped up on some pillows and a lap desk as she scribbled and wrote in her notebook. Their conversation had been going on for 3 hours after dinner, and both of them were obviously starting to droop. Still, neither wanted to be the first to relent and hang up first.
Yeah, I did actually. It's actually kind of a combination between 2 or 3 different laws if I'm reading everything correctly. One of them is the Outer Space Treaty, the Accords, and the Moon Treaty. There are a bunch of laws and rules to go along with it, which I have in the shared document I shared with you,
replied Parker as he stifled a yawn.
Oh, perfect.
I love it when nerds do their work, teased Lyn as she made a goofy face at the camera.
Ha ha, I could say the same to you. How much did you have written about pirates in your math class when you were supposed to be paying attention? I know, because I checked the document and saw you were typing away as soon as we left English,
said Parker, flipping the tables on Lyn.
No, you hush. I passed my test with flying colors, didn't I?
She shot back. Parker chuckled and nodded.
Yeah, like you said, nerd.
Lyn rolled her eyes and vanished from view as she stretched before popping back up to the camera. They stared at one another for a minute in silence, each holding the other's gaze or bashfully glancing away simultaneously. It took another minute before Lyn looked back at Parker and cleared her throat, obviously preparing to ask a question.
Parker? Do you mind if I ask you something?
The tiredness vanished instantly from Parker's eyes as the question sank in. This was something he usually asked his mom, and she usually replied with, "You can ask me anything." But only now did Parker realize how nerve-wracking that question could actually be. He bit his lip, feeling himself bristle, and those precious walls he had slowly lowered begin to rise once more.
Yeah? I mean, I guess. What's up?
Asked Parker. In the back of his mind, a flashback of Selena's conversation ran right through him. Was Lyn about to ask him if he liked her? Was she going to ask if they wanted to be boyfriend-girlfriend? only to immediately turn it on him? Was she going to ask about his condition? Would she ask why he was never at school? What if she wanted to meet up to write together in person or study together? His nerves started to make him squirm and sweat. Parker honestly didn't think it was that noticeable until he saw Lyn's curious expression. "You okay?" she asked. "I mean, that's not my question, but you're acting a bit weird all of a sudden. You can say no, you goof." Parker squirmed again and tried to shake his nerves away. No. I mean, I'm okay. It's just that the question could mean anything. So I'm just preparing for whatever," mumbled Parker. Lyn eyed him again, but shrugged and continued. "Well, you can always say no or abstain from answering. I hope you know that," stated Lyn in her usual matter-of-fact tone. "Anyway, I wanted to ask you something." Parker held his breath as Lyn eyed the camera and watched Parker's reaction to her question. "Are you the author of Welcome to My Little Life?" The question threw him so off guard that his expression was obviously a dead giveaway. Relief, curiosity, excitement, nervousness. Yeah. I mean, of course. It's just a bit of a side project and everything, but I like posting there. It's a good space for exposure and everything," Parker replied. The tenseness in his body dissipated, and the young teen could once again relax with his friend. The look on Lyn's face mirrored his own as she propped herself up closer to the camera, saying, "I knew it! I mean, I thought it was you, but didn't want to make things weird or bring it up. I totally follow you for your story about your Dungeons & Dragons character. Talel, right?" Parker had never really met someone who knew about his blog. He'd chatted with his followers like Carl, Zell, and so many others, but never someone he was already friends with. "No kidding?" asked Parker in a bit of disbelief. "You like it?" "Duh, of course. And you've liked some of my stuff too. I posted some pictures and you liked them. That's why I wanted to ask, to see if you knew," said Lyn. "I'm Lyn C. Photography." Parker felt his eyes go wide as he remembered the exact posts Lyn was talking about. The perspectives Lyn took was from the edge of a television stand that showed the depth and vastness of the living room while keeping everything in focus. "That's you? No way! I thought the style looked like yours, but I didn't know that was you." The two of them laughed at the strange coincidence. "How'd you even manage that perspective?" asked Parker. "HDR mode. Basically had to take two identical pictures and blend them together," said Lyn. "I could show you one of these days on my camera. I also had to blend it in Procreate, but it didn't require a lot of editing, which was nice." "Yeah, I'd like that a lot," agreed Parker, the last of his tension leaving his body. "Definitely," grinned Lyn. "If you don't mind my follow-up question, but you looked tense earlier. What was that all about?" Parker squirmed again and tried to shrug it off as he contemplated his reply. Bringing it up might pick at the scab that was over the sensitive spot surrounding his whole interaction with Selena, and not telling her more about his condition. He didn't want to lose Lyn as a friend, and he wanted to keep his condition close to his chest. But he also wanted to trust Lyn. She was someone who he cared about. Selena was right about one thing. you tell people you trust. And Parker felt like he could trust Lyn. At least, he thought he could trust her enough to talk about it a little.
Well, I mean, I thought you were going to ask about my condition,
said Parker. He braced himself for whatever Lyn was going to say next, and hoped he hadn't accidentally ruined something good.
Oh, that makes sense. I mean, I'm sure it's a sensitive thing for you and everything,
replied Lyn.
Did someone try and pry?
Parker felt himself nodding before he even realized he was responding.
I see. Well, I'm sorry that happened. I mean, I can't say that I'm not curious, but I wouldn't go asking questions unless you wanted to talk about something about it. I hope you'd be comfortable enough to talk about it with me if you needed to,
stated Lyn. Parker couldn't believe what he was hearing. Was it that easy? An announcement of curiosity accompanied with an invitation to refuse? The smile that spread onto Parker's face stretched from ear to ear as another wave of genuine relief filled him. This was exactly what he'd hoped Selena would say, and now he was hearing it from Lyn, someone who he cared about very much, despite knowing her for such a short time.
I would feel comfortable with that. You know, if I needed to talk about it and everything,
muttered Parker. Was it warm in the room? Or was it just him? There was a moment where the two of them made eye contact through the lens of the camera, and, for a moment, Parker could have sworn she was right there looking at him. His entire body felt tingly and excited. It felt like electricity was filling his body, pouring itself over him and making his heart race and pound. Another minute passed before Lyn cleared her throat and continued their conversation.
Good. Now, you have to tell me more about your story and where it's going to go. I swear your updates are so chaotic that it drives me crazy. What's going to happen with that princess? And is he going to cure the plague going through the community? I have to know!
Parker laughed and shook his head.
You know I can't spoil anything,
Parker teased.
Oh, spoil sport. You're either saying it because you're cruel and want to torture me, or because you don't know the answer,
accused Lyn, obviously playing in a tone that made Parker's heart race. The two of them continued talking for the next hour, where, reluctantly, Parker revealed a few details of his story to appease Lyn, before the two of them signed off simultaneously, accidentally falling asleep for a moment before startling awake and saying goodnight. Parker crawled into his bed, face hurting from smiling so much, and drifted off to a peaceful sleep.